Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan, the Miami Book Fair, and all of us at Books and Books, I'd like to welcome you to a virtual evening to celebrate the anthology, Making Good Time, True Stories of How We Do and Don't Get Around in South Florida, published by Highlight Books, edited and with an introduction by Lynne Barrett. Lynn teaches in the MFA program in creative writing at Florida International University and edits the Florida Book Review. She's the award-winning author of the story collections The Secret Names of Women, The Land of Go, and most recently Magpies, which received the Florida Book Awards Gold Medal for general fiction. Before we get started, and for those of you who might not know, today is Independent Bookstore Day, and we've been celebrating all day at our stores, both in-store and online. We thank you for coming by to say hello and for supporting us with your orders. We've gotten some beautiful comments and some of our author friends that I'd like to share with you. So from Edwidge Danticat, I love independent bookstores because they love us, readers and writers alike. They serve as community salons, meeting places, and living rooms. I can't wait until we're able to reconnect and gather at our indie bookstores again. From Kevin Kwan, no two independent bookstores are alike. Each one is a reflection of someone's originality and taste. I love poking around an indie bookstore and discovering what makes it unique. As an author, I know how important bookseller recommendations are, and there's nothing I love more as a reader than being recommended a book that I might not otherwise pick up and discovering a new treasure. From Dave Barry, like every author I know, I love independent bookstores. They're the beating heart of the literary world, welcoming readers, supporting writers, making their communities brighter and better. We need them now more than ever. From Richard Blanco, attending events at Books and Books in my mid-20s instilled in me a dream to someday write a book and have a reading at the store, embraced by a loving community of book lovers. That dream came true. Throughout the years since then, Books and Books has continued to be a partner in my dreaming and believing that poetry matters. It is my home within my Miami home, and more so, a home I carry in my heart wherever I am. Thank you to all who have shared your thoughts with us, and I hope all of you watching tonight will tell us why you love indie bookstores and Books and Books in particular by leaving your comments in the chat. You're also invited to ask questions by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to as many of these as we can after all of our guests have read from their work. You can find Making Good Time for purchase at Books and Books below by pressing the green button. Every purchase you make helps keep Books and Books running, so do it. And now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lynne Barrett to the stage to introduce our guests. Hi, Lynn.
Hi. I'm happy to be here with y'all. I'm so happy that we're having this particular event for this book on Independent Bookstore Day. We were originally scheduled to have this event in late April, which was when the date was supposed to happen for Independent Bookstore Day. And then things went into abeyance, and I was thrilled when it came back, and I was able to get the gang together that was going to be presenting then to present now. And this is a very South Florida book. I'm just going to hold up the cover. Don't mind my bookmarks, which you might be able to see the cover, and you can find it on the website too. And it's an extra super duper cover because it has a fold out. So you're getting this bizarro scene of every kind of movement happening in Miami. A sort of imaginary various things juxtaposed that would normally be in Miami. But what isn't there is people not there, not doing everything crazy. So we've had this twist on the title, how we do and don't get around in South Florida was, an allusion to us getting around and not getting around in that it was difficult. But I did not expect do not to also mean maybe we're not some of us are not getting anywhere at all. So, and that is fraught with a lot of other things. But even so, what we've had happen now shares themes, particularly about movement and the meaning of movement and what it is when we intersect and overlap in a community. That's in really all of these stories. How do we navigate? How do we know where we are? How do we understand each other? And often that's through telling stories about places and movement through time. So you're going to hear that from our 5 different contributors to the book tonight. And I will certainly let them carry that ball. But I wanted to give you a tiny taste from the introduction of the book. I dedicated the book to the intersection of Northeast 79th Street and Biscayne Boulevard because it's an intersection where I've been stuck a lot of times and thought about it. The INS building was there. Now it's a kind of hulk of its former self, waiting for another incarnation. It's the road from the beach originally to the Hialeah racetrack, north-south. The road came after the railway tracks, which came after the fact that those who lived here for thousands of years before used the high ground. It's sort of the high ground. So it's got a very ancient, a very recent, and a future history. And when I asked the authors to write stories, I suggested various concepts or themes which will come up. But I also asked them each to use a location line, which would be a location in their piece. It wouldn't necessarily always be there because nothing stays that still here. And what I found is when I asked them to do it, they were they were not going to tell me an intersection of 79th and Biscayne. No, they put the Palmetto or a Florida Turnpike North on-ramp North Miami or the mainland or something. So you can see we don't even, place is very hard to define and hold still here. I'm going to take these glasses off so I can read this, sorry. I also asked them to try to think of many modes of movement. We tend to use the word transit and people think about certain kinds of transportation, but all movement is transit, including going upstairs, and I actually tried to get something on parking garages and don't have it. There's subjects that aren't in here, but I was interested in all those kinds of spaces. And from all of I got, I made a list of the many modes of getting around. So I'll just read this bit and then I'll hand over. Airplanes, from early stunt flying onward, automobiles, many, old Corolla to pink Hummer limo, rental car to police cruiser, baby stroller, bicycles, blimps and dirigibles, canal boats, boat ride tours, and captaining a sailboat, buses, electric in the 20s, 70s transit, unair-conditioned, seatbelt-free school bus, or the 21st century 95 Express. Grocery cart, hearses, horses, jet skis, pier slants, 105-foot aerial ladder truck, skateboards, trains. We mostly all love trains. Trolleys, trucks, tow or landscaping, that's kinds of trucks. Walking, aka ambulating, which we'd like to do without risking our lives. Wheelbarrow, Winnebago. And so we have this kind of cascade of ways of getting around, but the important part is people and their stories. And so saying that we're all at this intersection is that a place where we can be exchanging stories. So our first reader is going to be Ana Veciana-Suarez, who is in a waiting position here. And I'm going to say a bit about her. One thing I want to say is that her writing has itself long been a kind of shared experience for all of South Florida, a kind of crossroads through her columns. She's now a syndicated columnist, and her commentary in Washington Post magazine, O Magazine, Latina, and many more places. Her novels include The Chin Kiss King and the young adult novel Flight to Freedom, and her nonfiction collection is essays, Birthday Parties in Heaven, Thoughts on Life, Love, Grief, and many other matters of the heart. And I will say that I asked the contributors to think about various things like territoriality, access, contested places, spaces. And Anna's essay is in the section of the book I called In and Out of Bounds, as she shows us one kind of contested space and what's at stake with that. Anna, are you here? Is she in? Ready? I'm not in charge of these controls. There. Anna, could you hear me?
Hi, Lynn.
Welcome.
Thank you for inviting me, and happy Independent Bookstore Day. And my essay is not so much about traveling as finding a parking space.
Hi.
So it's titled Handicap Parking Cheaters, and the place time is Kendall. On a steamy spring day in Miami, I wheel my Toyota Sienna van into a strip shopping center in Kendall, relieved to have missed afternoon rush hour traffic, but with my nerves scraped raw by the needs of my already or almost 89-year-old father. It's not that he's a particularly annoying backseat driver, nor that he has spent the past 20 minutes complaining about the sad fact that most of his friends are dead, nor that getting him in and out of a car has become more engineering project than family field trip. I'm used to all that. What puts me on edge, what classifies as my top transportation pet peeve, is something few others experience: finding a disabled parking space. It's like recovering a gold ring lost in the ocean, which is to say, highly unlikely. Nosing up and down the shopping center parking lanes, I soon discover that all 4 of the designated spaces are taken. I circle around the lot a few more times, hoping to find something near the restaurant. Nothing. Then I look for the friend meeting us for dinner. No luck. I end up dropping off my father, unfolding his walker, settling him in a seat, trotting over to the van, finding a far-off parking spot, and then racing back to him. I'm not yet pissed. If life has taught me anything, it is this: be flexible, adapt, improvise, move on. But that's hard when you're constantly confronted with moochers. On the way back to my dad, I noticed that 2 of the vehicles parked in the special spaces sport neither a handicap tag nor parking placard, an obvious violation of the law. Later, while munching on garlic rolls, I spot the driver of one of those vehicles capably, very capably, climbing into his souped-up Ford F-150. It's enough to ruin my stuffed shells. Few things anger me as much as able-bodied drivers who park their cars in spots reserved for the handicapped. In truth, this scene doesn't surprise me. Such obvious contempt for others' needs is hardly uncommon. I've encountered this problem more than I care to count, and it seems to happen more often in certain places. For example, we've had no problems with handicapped parking cheaters in the lots of medical buildings or physicians' offices. Maybe that's because drivers there are more aware of the necessity of special spaces. On the other hand, the most flagrant abuse occurs at malls, shopping centers, and other places of commerce, which leads me to believe that frustrated drivers park where they want to without thought to how they affect others. And yes, I've heard people say that not all handicaps are physically visible. A heart condition, say, is not noticeable, yet somebody who suffers from it may still need a special parking permit. True, but then the driver or passenger should make sure to display a handicap parking permit, and that's not been the case in a single incident I've faced. I'm not the only person who has encountered this problem. A friend who used a disabled parking placard for a few months while recovering from foot surgery came across many moochers in the short time she needed the special designation. She was unusually frank when I asked her about it. At first, she said, I was making excuses for the drivers. But after a while, I realized some people were just a-holes. Then I go on to explain about the many ways I've encountered people not being kind enough to not park there.
Chantel, can you let me back in? There we go. Hi. I'm laughing, still laughing, which is interesting because what can you do but laugh when it's so frustrating and irritating? Like, what are you going to do at the kind of people who do that and their lack of consideration? And one of you go into a lot of the broader vista of how this happens and affects people in your piece as well. But in the end, you're talking about the underlying nature of people who can't imagine the lives of others. And I've thought about that a lot. I think it's one of the things that I had in mind, that we could sit next to each other in traffic and not know each other. How do we know each other? And do we mostly know each other through bad conduct or extremely good conduct? So could you just say a little bit about that contemplation of this problem of a parking space, which is important, very important and personal? How you broaden out to think about the larger picture.
Well, you don't realize, if you're able-bodied and can walk anywhere, you don't realize really how important and why they exist until either you or somebody you love needs to park up close because they can't walk, or you have to take a wheelchair. Yet, I ran into this a lot, first with my mother, then with my father, but then I also found people who were wonderful, who would say, can I help you? Do you need any assistance? Would you like to sit here? Offered their seat if there was waiting. So you had, both sides of people, which is always kind of uplifting, that you have the people who are going to cheat, but also the people who see you going through this and want to help. And of course, and because we exist in social media, and there's like an organization called handicapfraud.org, and they have people post.
Gotcha.
At least when I wrote this, so
yeah.
So
I thank you very much. If you look over in the comments, you will see loads of people commenting on how much they enjoyed hearing your piece. And we only heard part of it. Read the book. I'll just keep saying that. Read the book. I'm going to thank you, Anna. And we're going to move to our next reader, who is Fabian Josephite. So there's a juggling of who's in and who's out going on here. We're crowdcast to some degree. And Fabian Josephite's Dancing in the Baron's Shadow from Unnamed Press was her debut novel. Her fiction, nonfiction, and poetry have appeared in the Master's Review, the Hong Kong Review. I was in that one with her. Nichas de Poesia, and the Highlight Books anthology, 8 Miami Poets. The question of how we know where we are, of orientation, and how we learn our way around, led a number of the contributors to write about the experience of children, whether from themselves as a child or the helping of children, which is what Fabienne did, from different angles. So, and this is all in a section that I called Family Trips. And so please give us your title and your location. Fabienne, read to us.
Oh, hi, Lynn. Hi, everyone. My story, my piece is called Strolling Down Snake Creek, and this takes place in, when I wrote this is about Snake Creek Canal in North Miami Beach. And what I do want to say about this piece is, when I wrote it, it's the first piece that I've published that's really about motherhood more than anything else that I've written. My son was about 2-3 years old at the time. He's now 5. But what I do want to say is that he actually likes to listen to me read that piece, probably because it's about him.
Right.
So I'll read a little bit from the piece. We decided our son would go to daycare from Monday to Friday in North Miami Beach, just walking distance from my house. Up to then, he'd spent all his time at home with me or with his grandparents. Mornings were rough for him, as they could be for any child freshly introduced to a new environment. As soon as the car would pull up in the lot, he'd start to fuss. By the time we rang the doorbell, he was clutching me. And then, as soon as I entered the front room and he saw all the kids gathered on the rug, the waterworks would begin. Tears, pleas, cries, "Mama, mama, mama." He was too upset even to eat breakfast with the other kids. When I picked him up in the afternoons, the teacher commented on how he ate his lunch with gusto. It somehow didn't occur to her that he was famished because he was too busy crying in the morning to eat. I left daycare heartbroken every morning, my own eyes wet with tears, trying to shake that feeling that I was abandoning him. My friends suggested tips to make the morning ride easy. One of them sent me a video of a popular children's program inspired by Mr. Rogers. "My son and I listen to this while we drive to school," she said. "It helps." We watched the video one evening and he was delighted with "Hold My Hand," a catchy little tune encouraging kids to try something new. What struck me was that the emphasis was placed on human contact, on holding hands to attenuate fears. Was that what was missing? After all, daycare was barely a mile away. When would I have time to hold hands with him while he started his meltdown? I tried singing the song in the car during the morning drive, but then the same scenario still occurred when exiting the vehicle. Then I remembered when I was young in Haiti, where families who can drive their kids to schools and often endure a lengthy and stressful commute. The bustle of city life, the smell of exhaust, the lack of trees, the heat, the self-absorption of people who seem to move like machines, the rubbing of shoulders, all of it appeared in my young mind as a kind of hell, and I developed headaches and nausea. Was this what my son was going through? Even on our brief trip, what did he see when he looked out the window? Other buildings, cars? Did the honks frighten him? And what about the sudden turns into a parking lot of a strange new world? Was that scary? By the second month of daycare, I decided something had to change. I started to feed him a light breakfast of toast and yogurt or fruit, and then, after this morning routine, I said, "Are you ready for school? We're going to walk." My son's face burst like sudden sunshine. He was already familiar with the expression "to go for a walk" because we did this often in the evenings, going to the playground or walking the dogs together. He held my hand, and I wondered if he would take off running to explore or linger like toddlers do as soon as they discover their parents have a destination and time frame in mind. But he never let go. We were going to school, and that to him meant we were holding hands. The walk to daycare took approximately 15 minutes down Snake Creek Canal. His small fingers wrapped around mine tightly, and we didn't talk. The scenery was different and peaceful, and he would point things out to himself. "Look, quack quacks. Look, woof woofs. Look, bike. Look, a boot." He's still working on pronouncing the word boat. We walked past joggers and walkers, and we turned left to a metal bridge connecting our side of the canal to the other. Under the canopy of trees, he spotted meows. We could see the school in the distance, and he recognized the blue awning and the playsets and tricycles lined up in rows. "There's your school," I announced. "We're about to see your teacher and your friends."
Thank you so much. One of the things you see in this book, various. Oh, I'm getting a lot of echo.
I can hear you fine.
Okay, good. Is that there's just a kind of desire to walk and be on ground level and move. In the book, you see lots of examples of that sense of the need to be attached to the place where you are and to be moving at your own pace and absorbing what's around you. And I was thinking about that in light of our current situation, because many people actually are much more confined. People are not zipping around the country on airplanes and things like that. And is there a benefit that people are finding in that? I you know, as they are sort of, they're confined and they're limited, but they're also then exploring where they are. And I was wondering what you might say to someone who's got children and the children are home, you know, much more now. Like, in what way would you suggest that someone could explore place without going into danger?
I think one thing that's been helpful, at least for us, is going outside in terms of finding a little nature trail, a place that's safe, not crowded, and that allows the children to feel grounded, and we can still hold hands. My son every now and then still likes to hold hands, even though he considers himself to be a big boy now. But I think there's a sense of safety and security when they are still with family and they can still have that human contact without putting themselves in danger.
And it seems to me one of the things I got from your piece was that it also is really helping to calm, from your earlier assessment of your reflection on your own childhood, that it's a way of calming anxiety as well, to just slow down and be.
Yes, I find it to be calming, and I can't remember anyone coming to that conclusion for me when I was young, because I experienced that anxiety a lot. But I find that that experience of walking him to school, switching from driving to walking, holding hands and embracing him, makes him feel a lot more secure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. We're gonna
Thank you.
Hear a different side, in a certain way, of the question of motherhood from Sammy Mack. So Sammy, I feel like it's a game show. Enter the room. Come on down. And is she in? Sammy Mack, as many of you will know, because you would have heard her on the radio, has been a journalist for, there you are, for WLRN News, where her healthcare reporting was supported by a fellowship from NPR and Kaiser Health News. She says of now that she's recently been freelancing a little and pandemic parenting a lot.
Yes.
And to use a transit metaphor, she said, it's okay to mention I off-ramped in part because of the tiny people. But what Sammy's going to read to you from is about an earlier period when she was reporting, and the point where the news story and her personal existence were put into this really difficult and juxtaposition, and really very much about territory and what territory is dangerous or off limits. So, Sammy, could you take me away?
Yes. And the place line here is Wynwood, Miami Beach, Little River. And what Lynn is alluding to is, in this story, we have just gotten our first locally acquired case of Zika in this timeline. And also, I have just found out I'm pregnant. So I'll start from there. We had been warned Zika was coming. For months, the horror had slowly unfolded in Brazil. An unprecedented wave of babies born with terrible brain damage and misshapen skulls. No one understood how the Zika virus, which had previously been considered relatively benign, could wreak such havoc. My radio station, WLRN, broadcasts from Palm Beach County to Key West. The Caribbean and Latin American diasporas are such a big part of our audience that if there's a hurricane in Haiti, an election in Venezuela, or an epidemic in Brazil, we consider it local news. I've heard public health experts and scientists say these connections are also part of what makes Florida a canary in the coal mine for new tropical diseases. People move back and forth. They get sick. The things that make them sick move too. Still, in May, when I interviewed Dr. Anthony Fauci, the head of the Infectious Disease Division at the National Institutes of Health, it was jarring to hear him say, "We will see local outbreaks." Will, not might. Epidemiology is a story about the intersection of people. Infectious diseases need us to spread. Sometimes it's an intimate connection, inhaling where others have just exhaled, preparing a meal with soiled hands, making love. Other diseases like Zika spread best with the help of an intermediary, what epidemiologists call a vector. Like the mosquito, it bites a sick person, The virus reproduces inside the mosquito, and the infectious needle-nosed menace injects the virus into someone else when it takes its next blood meal. That's actually the scientific term for a mosquito bite, to take a blood meal. While reporting, I kept hearing that phrase. It sounded ominous even before I got pregnant. Once I knew there was someone else's tiny, miraculous brain forming inside me, the image made my skin crawl. In my mind, I put the mosquitoes of South Florida on notice. I will not be your blood meal. On July 29th, we got the map of what would be the first of 3 Zika zones, areas where the health department suspected mosquitoes were actively spreading the virus. The first boundaries included the heart of the Arts District in Wynwood and ended a few blocks north of where my main office was downtown. I mostly stopped working out of the downtown studios. Although the mosquito that spread Zika, Aedes aegypti, doesn't fly farther in its lifetime than about the length of a football field, the Zika zone was too close for me. Aedes aegypti is an invasive species. Scientists say it originated in Africa and was carried to the Americas in the miserable hulls of slave ships, a stowaway who flourished on the same humid, blood-fueled commercial routes that drove the development of the Caribbean and the American South. Diseases these mosquitoes spread, like dengue, yellow fever, and malaria, became endemic in the United States. They became a national security issue in 1942 when the Office of Malaria Control in War Areas was established to combat the threat of vector-borne illnesses around military bases. After the war, the OMCWA took on a broader civilian mission and opened offices in Atlanta under a new name, the Communicable Disease Center, or CDC. The CDC launched a malaria control plan involving a wartime insecticide. By 1951, more than 4.6 million applications of DDT had been sprayed inside American homes to kill disease-carrying mosquitoes. Malaria was eradicated from the US. 65 years later, the CDC, now the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, issued its first domestic travel advisory. Pregnant women were to avoid the Miami Zika transmission zones. Then we were told to avoid Miami altogether if we could. I couldn't. What I could do was continue to dress for a Minnesota winter and bathe myself in DEET. I avoided active transmission zones, which eventually included a big swath of Miami Beach and the Little River neighborhood. Whenever there was a press conference inside a Zika zone, one of my colleagues, frequently an intern, went in my place. I ordered a wholesale carton of bug spray and distributed bottles to my coworkers as a sheepish thank you. As my belly grew and my territory shrank, it became clear that I was unavoidably part of what I was reporting on. I went public with my pregnancy on air one Friday afternoon in August. Like many pregnant women I had interviewed, I experienced a creeping, mosquito-induced agoraphobia. Then my Zika test results got caught in a state backlog. Being the stymied pregnant health reporter in the middle of a Zika outbreak made me a bit of a journalistic cause célèbre. When a team from PBS's NewsHour came to Miami to talk to me and other pregos, the producer and crew took turns asking if I would give them a driving tour of the hot zones for some B-roll. No, I said flatly. I swallowed the urge to scream, "Are you fucking kidding me?" Everybody asked if I was scared. Unnerved, I said. They asked about my Zika tests. Negative so far, I said. They asked how upsetting it was to use chemicals during pregnancy. DEET is very safe, I explained. By the 4th time I was asked if I had considered moving, I wanted to grab the reporter by the collar and ask if they knew the meaning of home. My husband and I have chosen to raise our children here. My daughter's first words were an equal mix of English and Spanish. We'd yet to taste the first crop of mangoes from the tree at our house that we had just bought. The mosquitoes might be driving me indoors, but they would not be driving me away. Oh, and spoilers, the baby is fine. Baby's fine.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't think we call that a spoiler when it's good news, really.
Yeah.
So I had said to you that the as my belly grew and my territory shrank, sticks in my mind is really getting it down. But it's about the nature of place, like how we exist in place, because you describe a much broader panorama earlier on in which something that's far away in the world is connected to us. So yeah. Even what is place, in a sense, we like to think we have some kind of limitation of what we understand, but in a way, both the very big is affecting us and the very small we can be caught up in. You had said to me how many parallels there are to now in your piece, which of course was not anticipated.
No.
And I'm just wondering, like, what really strikes you when all of a sudden so many places are Zika zones in effect?
I mean, I feel a deep empathy for people who are having to be inside like this for the first time and who are being robbed of the sort of rituals and both in a big sense and a daily sense of the things that are comforting and home to them, because that was such a jarring experience. And you know, when we went on lockdown that first couple weeks, I was like, oh, I recognize this. And that's kind of on an interpersonal level. And then on a larger level, at this point in human history, a global pandemic is a series of choices that somebody made. And some of them are hard choices, and some of them, you know, we'll never really know. You know, it's hard to measure lives saved versus lives lost, but it is a series of choices. And that part of it is something that nags at me the same way that it did then.
Mm-hmm. That makes lots of sense. I mean, you're so good at pulling together all the layers of science and, you know, and life that are in there. There's a comment from Larry Leibowitz saying that you have a pre-pandemic Dr. Fauci reference. Who knew a transportation essay would have such timely epidemiology callbacks? And that's true. I know that I asked you because I'd known that you were reporting. I'd heard that part of it. I only later met you personally and realized this was going on and realized it was such a fascinating thing, how much you were going through, but having to present a certain kind of professional public face. So it's fascinating.
It's weird to be on the other side of it. It is really weird to be on the other side of it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We're going to keep moving because we've got two more. Chantal Acevedo is our next reader. And I know she's here because over in the comments, there's some highs going on within people meeting over in the column there. So Chantal Acevedo, there she is the author of 5 novels for adults, including The Distant Marvels and The Living Infinite. And I put in for adults because her most recent book is the very beautiful middle grade novel set in South Florida, Muse Squad, The Cassandra Curse. We can have South Florida and the Muses. We can pull any parts of the world in here. She's also the director of the Creative Writing Program at the University of Miami. And she's going to read to us now. You ready?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Lynn, also for bringing us all together today. It's so good to be here. So I'm going to be reading a piece called T is for Turnpike, and it's part of a larger work I've been working on for a long time, which is kind of memoir-ish and in the form of a primary, like an ABC primary. So this is T is for Turnpike. Don't bite. A road trip for South Floridians can go one of two ways. South to the Keys, the road lined by the mangroves that Elizabeth Bishop in a poem called Florida described as white swamps with skeletons, or north, along the Florida Turnpike. It is officially named the Ronald Reagan Turnpike, which is perhaps why Cubans like it so much. Certainly, my own grandparents were fans of the Gipper and may have felt safer zooming down that road named after the man who took on the Soviets and won. If not for the vision of Thomas Manuel, a veteran of both the Mexican expedition and World War I, we would not have a turnpike today. Once toll booths interrupted the highway. Upon entering the turnpike, one would receive a long card with notches cut into it, each notch representing a port of call. When exiting the turnpike, one paid their toll depending on which notch their exit was on. Manuel died at the age of 88 while at a public hearing, speaking too vociferously for his own good against toll increases. I like to think that his last word was "turnpike," uttered just before his collapse, and that behind his eyelids in those last flickering minutes, he saw a long gray road before him. The turnpike cuts first through Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach, then, like a curtain drawn, the world opens up to a more pastoral view. Subdivisions giving way to empty land, dotted here and there with live oaks, Spanish moss swinging from their branches like fish hooks, which also resemble beards, to return, however obliquely, to Elizabeth Bishop. Where are all those people going on the turnpike, stopping every few hours at one of the 8 service plazas where one can get lottery tickets, travel-sized Pepto-Bismol, and Starbucks mocha? If you were a member of my family, then the answer was always, without divagation, Walt Disney World. Turnpike used in a sentence. Oye, Paco, we have to leave early for Disney tomorrow. El turnpike se pone de madre a las 7. Further definitions of turnpike. Every summer, my family went to Disney World. Some years, we went twice. My uncle even bought a camper for these trips, an old Winnebago, and we would load it up with as many people as possible. My mother and me, my grandparents, my aunt and uncle, their 4 kids, and my other aunt and uncle, and their 2 children. It was not a large Winnebago. I remember sitting on my grandmother's lap as we bumped along the turnpike. My older cousins wrestled in the bed above the driver's seat, and my uncle would yell at them in futility, confined as he was to the brake and the accelerator, to the steering wheel and the mirrors that needed attention. And my cousins, whose blood always went cold at their father's admonitions, took the opportunity to play, safe in their dark, horizontal nook. The camper always broke down in places with colorful names: Yeehaw Junction, Jupiter, Port St. Lucie, Kissimmee, and Stewart. My favorite game was to ask my grandmother to pronounce the latter, and she would say, Stuart, each time, that pesky S making me laugh and laugh. She knew I was making fun, but she would kiss my head and then force me to eat a snack she'd packed in her purse. I was always too thin, always forced to eat. So it was little wonder that on the nights when we were stuck on the side of the road, I was easily wedged between bodies like a bookmark. Chanti, ven acá, they would say, and I would try to sleep amid the sounds of snores and crickets outside. Once, the crickets there on the side of the road of the turnpike were so loud that I felt my grandmother rise at night, fling open the door, step out into the mud, and scream, Cállense! The crickets were silent for a moment, such crystal silence, and in that quiet the whole family seemed to sigh, to say, at last, vacation. The way back was never quite as fraught, and to my memory, the camper never broke down when we were southbound again. We would return to our lives in Hialeah, to the house I lived in with my grandparents and single mother. Souvenirs, like glass figurines of Mickey Mouse or Snow White, would go in the china cabinet, right next to my grandparents' wedding topper, which they'd brought with them from Cuba. Those plaster figures with the stern faces so drab, next to the bright Disney colors. Beneath them, behind a door, sat a coconut with cowrie shells for eyes. This was El Egua, and he sat on a dish into which my grandmother poured aguardiente sometimes. His purpose was to keep away bad things, and most days it worked just fine. The sounds of the turnpike would be far away then, replaced by sirens wailing up and down 60th Street, or my neighbors on 10th Avenue who talked long into the night, sometimes arguing, sometimes blasting old school salsa and merengue, dancing there on the porch. My grandmother never rose to hush them, though I often did, cranking open the jalousie windows and saying, shh, into the night. Of course, who could ever hear me? My admonition may have been the wind, or the rustle of a palm tree, or the way skin brushes skin when dancing casino at night. Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So one of the things is that sounds like an end, but it's not the end.
Mm-mm.
Because this piece has a very long footnote, which takes us on the journey sort of multiple times across time, looking back at the journey and other things that happened in between. So it's got a kind of layered design to it, which is very beautiful. And to me, it's also full of, in its structure, what it's like when you've made a trip, you know, as a family trip or other kinds of things multiple times. You get, you know, Yeehaw Junction. There's like an entire, how many million people that like all know this name of this place. And how we create maps in our own minds, I think is part of it, and how that holds memory. so that I'll say, without plot spoiling, that the place being gone to in this end note, footnote, is Disney World. So we're seeing that. And I was reminded that when I was first at FIU, there was someone who was who was working on an anthropology book, a scholar working on it, that was about Disney World as a place of pilgrimage, as kind of the equivalent of making the Hajj, that it was a place of pilgrimage, that it had made itself a site that everyone had to do. So there would be a sense of shared space. But to me, the more interesting thing when reading yours has to do with that when a family creates a ritual, it could be any ritual. Playing miniature golf, like, in New Jersey at the Jersey Shore, I could say. And it has the effect of creating a sense of structure in our time and a structure for our memories. And I don't know what the rest of the book is like, but I do think this is something that's in a lot of your other writing.
Oh,
too,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's funny that I'm actually sitting right here, because if I just tilt this, it's in my room, but I have like all of these, like, I've been building this gallery wall during quarantine, and I'm like, what do I put up there? And I was like, I'm going to put places that just hold really good memories. So it's just like a variety of places. And I write often out of memory, or sort of excavating memory. Even the middle grade novel, which is about magical, girls, is, fueled by memory in many ways. And often my starting point is place. I'll go to a place and remember 10 different things about it, sort of in all of these layers, as you mentioned. So yeah.
I see we're struggling for the next person to come in. And so I'm just going to say that it has to be, Tom, whatever you logged in from, that she can recognize. So, and I'm not sure whether that was the right one or not. So they're fighting over here. So I'll keep talking because...
she says she's got him. She says, I got him.
Okay. See, I knew if I gave her some cover, you have to give someone cover while they're trying to pull the guy in. Yeah. So I guess having that be thwarted right now, people can't repeat. They have lots of things they normally do. People have told me 100 times, normally I'd be here, normally I'd be there. So what happens? One of the reasons we don't like that is we're losing that reassurance of creating that continuity, do you think?
I think maybe, we're talking here about memory. So we're talking also about sort of things that we can go back into the past to revisit, in our own imaginations. If anything, I think we're, at least with my kids and with my family here, we seem to have slowed down enough to start creating memories in our neighborhood that we wouldn't have, I think, before. On our own street and our walks.
The important thing is that you're together and you're doing something. You think the thing is the important part, but it's the together part.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it's the together thing. And you're right. It's the littlest things that create those little traditions, that happen within a family. It's never the big thing you think it is, right? It's never the thing to go. It's not like we saw Big Ben. It's not that. It's I found this like coin on the floor, or I found a 4-leaf clover or whatever. Like it's that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to move next to Thomas Swick, maybe known to many of you from his decades as the travel editor of the South Florida Sun-Sentinel. His writing has appeared in Missouri Review, Plowshares, Long Reads, 6 editions of Best American Travel Writing. There you are. You're here. And the most recent of his books is The Joys of Travel and Stories That Illuminate Them. And I would like to add that during the pandemic, he's been drawing cartoons. He had a whole other career just in the back pocket to bring out, which can be found on his website, thomasswick.com. And he's our closing reader tonight. But in the book, his is the first piece in the book. And I spent a lot of time. The work came in, and then I was organizing. And the first section is called Time Travels because it uses movement as a way of also looking at and seeing the past in the course of that movement. So I'm going to ask Tom to read us some of that.
Okay, Lynn, thanks again for organizing this. This is great. I'm glad I was found too. I wrote about taking the train to Miami in the days before Brightline, when the main attraction was elevation. It's called Coming to Miami, and it's Tri-Rail to Metro Rail, Fort Lauderdale to Miami. It begins in Broward when you climb to the top of the double-decker Tri-Rail. You look down at the cars on I-95 with a feeling of superiority that's not tied to speed. They're moving faster than you are, but to vantage point. It's like having a pair of blinkers removed. The place you've always driven through now lies literally at your feet. Your eyes linger on things that once sailed past. Pleasure Emporium, ye old rock shop. Pleasure Emporium, you imagine, is filled with model trains. At the Metrorail transfer station, escalators carry you to new heights. The view from the platform is the money shot of Miami taken from behind, the skyline now rising out of a sea of warehouses. Treetops frill flat roofs in the distance, but there is not a sign of water. The place appears as landlocked as Dallas. Your train arrives, looking like an escapee from the New York City subway. Inside, the seats are low, the windows smudged, the passengers dulled to the upcoming show. But you can't wait. The train glides above parking lots fronting big box stores, then vacant lots, car lots, school bus lots, tractor-trailer lots, body shops with more cars sitting in their lots. You pass over leaning piles of tires, dumpsters overflowing with hubcaps. In one stellar boneyard, automobile carcasses stacked in threes rise next to heaps of silvery parts. A still life of stilled motion thrilling you on the train. Among the vehicles in one lax lot sits a lone boat, like a civic reminder. The train moves quickly over pawn shop and tattoo parlor, the next motel and the auto trading company. It is like ziplining for urbanites, providing a look down at human nature. The houses on the leafy street below have fenced yards and barred windows. After Brownsville, which you've always heard about, the train runs parallel to the airport expressway. The Bougainvillea Blossom Median is your rainforest canopy, with a view toward the egg-white Marlins Park beyond. Allapattah gives you an even more evocative place name. It's the word the Seminoles used for alligator. But after the University Medical Complex, the White Coat Quarter, Overtown tops it. The Black Police Precinct and Courthouse Museum appears, followed by a church that, as the train advances, reveals itself as the Performing Arts Center. And then you're delivered into downtown, which you've seen many times, but never from this perspective. The Miami-Dade County Courthouse looks right at home, framed in a train window. You're tempted to go have a look at its 1920s lobby, and then maybe a drink at the Langford Hotel, the proper watering hole at the end of a train journey, especially this one, since the bar is on the roof. But you stay on board for the crossing of the river and the High Line entry into the Glass City. Window-walled condos rise from the banks, turning the boats into toys in a tub. A shirtless guy reads on his 8th floor balcony like the dwarfed everyman in a Senpei illustration. You get off at Brickell and take the long stairways down to the street. It is lined with cars, the sidewalk dotted with lunchtime workers. There's a lightness to your step that transcends your relief at not having to remember where you parked. You've returned the city to its ancient place as terminus, epicenter, sunlit bazaar, and in the process, you've gazed down on it with the angels. That's it.
That is, am I in? That is so beautiful. That ending is so beautiful. And the you in that makes us take the trip. You know, that really is a pleasure to feel yourself doing it and makes you want to do it as well. And I'm struck by how much it's about perspective by doing the elevation and of seeing places, something becomes very tiny. And I do think one of the things about Miami in my time here has been the great amount of proliferation of taller and taller buildings, which have sort of changed what the skyline was. A lot of them are like, I think of them as glass cliffs kind of along the water. Mm-hmm. How that makes other things small that didn't seem so small before. You know, that's interesting. I also was thinking, I'd love to ask all the authors this, and maybe some people could type in, but and I think it's a question for everyone who's here who is living through this and is writes or aspires to write is, you know, how will stories be told about this time we're in now. How many stories are unfolding that out of sight in many ways, and how will they be told? And you do see on various sort of literary sites kind of allusions to other times of people being locked in a plague and so on. But this isn't quite like that. So I just feel like there's like sequels, about all of these things of movement, illness, boundaries, all that kind of stuff. Are there travel writers trying to write now?
Writing travel stories is difficult, obviously, when you're not traveling. I've noticed a number of travel writers are doing more kind of memoir stuff now, looking back at past travels, just by necessity, because we're sequestered at home. But I have a feeling that a lot of people who maybe never wrote before are writing now. People are baking bread, people are perfecting dance moves. I'm drawing cartoons. So I think a lot of people are probably writing, and we're going to see a lot of stories when this is over.
I think so too. One of the things that I'll just mention is that in the book, the very last section is called "Where Are We Going?" and has pieces by, among others, Richard Blanco, who I think is here. And one of the things about that in the "Where Are We Going?" is it also seems to have caused people to go into another direction, which was contemplating our interconnection more than just a crossroads. It's, at Biscayne and 79th, our interconnection via the water, the oceans, and the atmosphere, and how the place is not just this thing on a map, but the place is both laterally and vertically in its own sense of continuous flux, danger, which isn't the same danger as right now, but it struck me that people become very aware. Florida is so flat. I think the tall towers are trying to block the reality of it. It's so flat, it's so low. And so I think there's a sense of really people being more interested in other people's stories than they might have been at a certain time. It's sort of like, wait, I need to know about people besides who I see all the time. So that's another thing that more readers can be happening when we're all locked in too.
Hopefully.
and maybe they'll read this book. But I'm an optimist, so there is that. I can't kick it and have it. Anyway, thank you. I want to thank. We're right near the end of our time. What I see, I don't really see so many questions as people responding and talking about what they want to write about and what they want to do, which is one of the things I was asking that question for, is what do things with journal entries, do other kinds of writing, how can you do that? So I really appreciate the warmth of everybody and patience, and I'm really glad we got to spend this time together. Is Christina here? You just want to wind me up?
I wasn't sure if you wanted me back or not.
Of course I want you back. And I'm going to say you're seeing people they want to plug Indie Bookstore Day, which indeed this was a great event for Indie Bookstore Day. And our virtual version of it, it seems to me, is sort of saying how much you can do that you never thought you could do. There are people here from very far away. And
I just want to say thank you. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Thank you to everyone who's out there supporting us. I mean, it's a virtual community, but it's a community anyway, nonetheless. And so I'm so happy always to see the names that I recognize, to be able to, see you out there, even if I can't see you in person. So thank you so much. And we got through it. Far as the production is concerned, this is first time.
This is your record largest cast.
Right. That we have brought all of these people on this way. So
it can be done.
It can be done. We have now proved that it can be done. So thank you, Lynn. I have a question for you, Lynn.
Sure.
What was it like editing the anthology? Like, how did you decide the writers you were going to ask, and how difficult was that? That must have been really rough.
First, I had to make up what I thought the book would be when there was no book and propose it to Highlight Books, which I thought would be the perfect press for it. And they were great. They also went and got a grant and are going to do is the first of a trilogy of things that are about Miami's future. Great. But I had made a wish list. I mean, a list, and I was trying to reach as broadly as possible. But I also asked other people to suggest people. So there are people in the book who I'd never met at the point when we were doing this, although I've met some of them since at events, like Larry.
Oh, interesting.
And so, but I also gave a lot of prompts, I would call it, sort of not, you just don't want the kind of same complaining kind of story, which people could do. And so I really wanted a variety of voices, people who wrote in all different forms. This is nonfiction, but they were, normally they might be a poet, they might be a journalist, there could be any number of things. And so, I know that with the press, we also did some, brainstorming of people to ask. And I asked people, some people said no, they didn't have time, they didn't have an idea, perfectly fine. Then we did a little bit of back and forth just to say, they could say, I have a couple ideas. Janine Capo-Crusade, I have a couple ideas. And I said, well, I like that one because it can, because of something it connected to, and she wrote it. So some of it is you just bemuse people into doing what you want. I can't quite explain.
If anyone can do that, it's you.
It was pretty much almost entirely by email. So it wasn't, I wasn't plying them with drinks or anything. But then what would happen is somebody really, you have to write something and then not think that's the end of it. So they would write something and then I'd say, I wonder about this, or I have questions about that, or I got lost here, or you don't have to explain that to me, or whatever it is. It's not editing in the sense of I'm crossing out your words. It's a lot of questions to which writers will respond and develop. And that's
a great kind of editing. That's the best kind of editing.
And then later, I could go through and say, okay, we can tighten that up or whatever. Anjanette Delgado is here. Her piece was picked up pre-publication of the book, but just for the New York Times, Modern Love. And they cut and changed it differently. And so, I think she'll say, like, I'm the kinder editor, but they had their length limit and things like that. So editing is a very collaborative process, as I like doing it. Great. Sammy likes editing with me. And once you've done that, I've done other anthologies that I've co-edited and edited. So once you've done that, you have connection. Also, anyone here who's, wants to come take a class at FIU sometime, like we have a whole world of writers doing things, and you don't even have to be here now. So
someone is actually, Christina Garcia is asking, is there any more information about the next book?
I'm not doing the next book. I'm the editor of this book. The idea was the others would have different concepts and different editors. I gather that there were submissions. Mm-hmm. And there was some confusion in the handling of submissions with Submittable. There might have been a tech collapse of some kind that I didn't do it that way because I did it myself by email. This was pre-Submittable taking over. So I would have had a record of everything. So I gather there's been some having to backstep and figure it out. It's about drowned Miami. It was visions of sort of elegies for the future of Miami if it was underwater, and the pieces were to be very short. And I heard some pieces people were working on, but I wasn't involved in it, so I couldn't tell you more. But I think the press is attempting to assess what happened to some things and get them back again. And that's all I really know. So I'm sorry, if you want to send me an email, I could try to give you more information, but I'm not enmeshed in it. I do know that email is very secure. It's a lot of work, and my computer was full, but it is very secure compared to going through various intermediaries.
And then Sarah is just telling us that she saw another presentation about this book at the Sunnyland.
Yes, that was our last time. That was back on March 1st. We were at Sunnyland. And that she
bought the book and read it, and it's great. It's very good.
Somebody said they bought 2 copies. And Jeanette read it, that one. We had a packed room on March 1st. And I've heard of nothing amiss from that. It was a really joyous, wonderful event with a different set of presenters, because I have 32 authors, so I get to do lots of mixing and matching.
Well, then let's do it again.
Absolutely, we can do it again. I have people that haven't gotten to do it because they're out of state, but they could do it now.
Great. Well, again, thank you. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you to the readers. Thank you to everyone. And buy this book. It's terrific. If you don't have it already, buy 1, 2 copies.
It's a lovely gift. I'm going to just
hit
tell
the green button at the bottom of the screen.
Someone I know said that she got it for a friend who lives in South Florida, but not in Miami. And then he started carrying it in his elevator in his building, and everyone started talking to him because it's an icebreaker. Who knew, among other things. So got a lot of uses.
Okay, well then I'll say good night. Good night to you. Good night to everyone.
All
Be safe, stay well, and we'll see you again. We'll see you
Yes.
next time. Bye.
Thank you.